I turned on the news Monday morning and the U.S. women's soccer team was all over almost every major network. NBC's Today Show, CBS This Morning, ABC's Good Morning America. All because a lawsuit these players have been working on for years was finally filed on Friday, International Women's Day. And the lawsuit reads about like you'd expect. It claims the U.S. Soccer Federation, which governs and employs both the men's and women's national teams, has failed to promote gender equality, refusing to treat and to pay male and female players equally, and so the women are suing over alleged violations of the Equal Pay Act and the Civil Rights Act. In the complaint, the women claim that in a hypothetical 20-game season where each team won all 20 matches, the female players would be paid a maximum of about $100,000 for the year, while the average men's player would earn over $250,000, meaning roughly speaking, a female player would be earning about 38% of a similarly situated male player currently. And the reasons why this is the case are shocking to absolutely nobody, except for apparently these women themselves. Within the suit, the U.S. Soccer Federation is quoted as saying, "Market realities are such that the women do not deserve to be paid equally to the men." The women characterize that statement as discriminatory, but if it is, then so is the entire viewership of soccer, generally speaking. There just isn't as much money in women's soccer. That is the clear and obvious reality. And so the women demanding a financial slice that's equal to the men's is a demand for a slice that's bigger than the pie itself. The money just is not there. Last year, the Men's World Cup in Russia generated some $6 billion in overall revenues. For comparison, the Women's World Cup is expected to generate $131 million for the entire 4-year cycle of 2019 to 2022. That's a 45-fold difference. The U.S. women point to their 2015 World Cup win as a counterpoint, which generated a singular year in 2016 when the U.S. women's team pulled more revenue than the U.S. men's team. But that's the anomaly, not the trend. And it's worth noting that even at a time when the U.S. women's team was extraordinarily good, world champions, they only barely edged out the U.S. men's team in revenue generated. And speaking of the pie and the supposed fair share of it, amid all of this complaining of discrimination, there's actually a very credible case to be made that the women are already getting a bigger slice than they earn. I don't have year-to-year numbers, and the numbers I do have are for the World Cup overall, not specifically for the U.S. teams, but they're still worth considering by proxy. In 2015, when the U.S. women won the tournament, the event generated $73 million in revenue, and the women's players were paid out 13% of that figure. By comparison, the 2010 Men's World Cup generated $4 billion in revenue, and only 9% was paid out to the male players. And that difference looks like it's widening in women's favor, actually. Last year, the men were paid out 7% of the World Cup revenue they generated, while the current cycle for women is expected to pay them out close to 23%. So if the case is about supposed fair share, there's a credible case that the women's share is already much fairer than the men's. Without getting too lost in the financial weeds, the situation is quite simple. Way more people enjoy watching men's soccer, so men's soccer events generate way more money. So the male players get paid more. This is all common sense stuff, except to the U.S. women's soccer team, apparently. So it was baffling to listen to these TV interviews and hear these women try to explain why that basic reality is actually itself due to discrimination and not simply viewers' tastes. That, and of course, they explain why they want all the benefits the men enjoy, but when it comes to equality in terms of risk and downside, well, hold on. Then there are actually important differences between men and women. Very convenient. The primary argument they're making is that women's soccer isn't generating less money because people enjoy watching it less. No. You actually enjoy watching it very much. You just don't know it yet because the money isn't being spent on the marketing to inform you.
Often the argument is, well, you know what? Guys fill the stands, guys bring in more money, so therefore guys get more. But what's the other argument there?
You know, I think you have to look at the investment of that U.S. Soccer has on the sport. When we look at the investment U.S. Soccer should make, we look at from the ground up. We look at from the academies and the youth levels. We look at the promotions of games and how I feel like we are less promoted than the men's side.
Do you believe, Alex, that the women's team has been undermarketed, and that has had a huge effect.
Yes, I think there's no question.
Where do I even start? This is like arguing that punters are paid less than quarterbacks because the NFL isn't marketing punters like they do for Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. Alternatively, one is on a different level of performance than the other, and the audience tends toward that elite product. There is no level of investment or advertising that the NFL can put into promoting punters that will make the average consumer buy a punter jersey over a Brady jersey. That's not lack of advertising. That's not discrimination. That's just market reality. And the same idea applies to women's soccer. But hey, let's humor the business side of it, or the economics of it anyway. It's fun. Let's think about the strategy these women are describing, that the business that is U.S. soccer should take the money generated by its more popular product, the men's game, and invest it in its less popular product, the women's game, as a means to generate money somehow. Why would you use your success to subsidize your weakness? Imagine you manufacture cars and the year-end sales data come in, and one of your models sells exceptionally well and another one is lacking. What kind of an executive would say, hey, take all that money generated by the successful car and dump it in that car that nobody buys? An executive who sinks the company. That's who. But hey, at least the men and women will equally sink on that fair share ship, and after all, that's what really matters. And listen to this supposedly objective CBS reporter scrambling to cover for this nonsense narrative.
In this particular lawsuit, they will be able to do discovery, and you will be able to see not only the disparity that they claim in terms of marketing of this team. The ticket prices are lower at the women's games than at the men's games. That's part of the reason of the compensation. They don't promote them. They're not on the same channels as the men's team, even though the women's team has a huge following.
Yes, but why are the tickets to the women's games less? Why are the TV contracts less? Are we really supposed to believe that it's all just arbitrary hatred of women, that there is in fact a ton of money to be made, but these evil soccer executives say, no thanks, I hate women more than I like money? Are ticket prices lower because the executives hate women, or are the ticket prices a function of supply and demand, and there's less demand for the women's games? Are the TV contracts lacking because the TV executives hate women, or because viewers don't tune in for women's soccer? If you honestly think it's arbitrary oppression and not market reality, consider this YouTube commenter's question. Would you rather find a $10 bill or free tickets to a women's soccer game? And if you answer like everybody answers, and you almost certainly did, you are part of that market reality. The lady's case gets even worse when an interviewer inadvertently exposes their conveniently selective perception of equality. They mean equality in benefits only, equality in positives only, not equality in risks and responsibilities. In the interviews, these women explain how they're not just after equal pay, but holistic equality. Everything should be equal across the board.
Why on earth wouldn't we pay people equally and treat people equally and, invest in people equally in general? In order to have, I think, a fair and a balanced conversation around compensation, we need to look at everything. We need to look at the way the youth teams are funded. We need to look at the way our staff, our coaching staff, our medical staff is funded. We need to look at promotion and branding and marketing and sponsorship. We don't feel like we're funded equally from top to bottom, and that's really what we're fighting for, sort of a holistic approach to both programs for the Federation.
Unless equality has any downsides, though, because then we actually want nothing to do with it.
The women's soccer team have a guaranteed contract. In other words, whether you play or not, whether you're injured or not, you get that money that is in your contract. Whereas the men, if they don't play, they don't get the money. Now, if you were to get equal pay, would you be willing to give up that guaranteed contract and really be on equal footing with the men?
I think it's okay that the compensation structures are a little bit different. I think our realities are a little bit different. But I feel like it's a little bit more complicated an issue of that, given the realities of both, the men's season and our season.
Oh, I see. So when they're to your benefit, the differences between men and women are very important, but when they're to your detriment, The differences between men and women are arbitrary and discriminatory. I'll start considering your complaints about equal pay when you start standing for equal principle. It'll be interesting to see how this lawsuit turns out because it'll add some clarity to what equal pay for equal work actually means, at least as far as the law is concerned. The Equal Pay Act says you can't pay men and women differently for doing the same job except in cases where earnings are measured by quality or quantity of production. So what is production and how do we measure it? That'll be the question to answer. The U.S. Soccer Federation will say, I think rightly, that it's dollars and cents. The women filing this lawsuit will say that it's sporting achievement. They'll say we win championships and the men do not. But the trouble is that a women's soccer championship has a different monetary value than a men's soccer championship. And you can say that's unfair. You can call that discriminatory. You can blame whatever you want. But at the end of the day, even if you're a soccer fan, you are almost certainly watching only one of these two championship games. And that's not lack of exposure. People are well aware of women's soccer's existence. I don't like soccer at all, and I was aware of its existence. I'm even more aware of it after making this video. I'll even take a moment to increase my awareness and go to their website and look at every page and refresh it a million times. I still will take that YouTube commenter's deal for a fresh Hamilton instead of comp tickets. That's not discrimination. That's just market reality. The newest PewDiePie video will get hundreds or thousands of times as many views as this video will. But I'm not going to demand my fair share of PewDiePie's views because after all, we do the same work. It's a much healthier attitude to be thankful that there's a viable market for you to do something that you love and would do for free anyway. That is a jackpot that most people will never find. It'll be hugely ironic if their crazy demands in their lawsuit tear apart the business that offers them such luxury, but I won't be sympathetic for them if it does. And how could I be anyway? That would involve actually paying attention to women's soccer. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.